This is a test of the City of Palatka audio system.
At this time. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. At this time, we're going to have our pledge of allegiance and our invocation. Pastor Johnson, would you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we thank you for your love to us. We pray that you will bless this meeting. We pray that we make the right kinds of decisions. Thank you for our community. Bless our community in every way, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Commissioners Tammy McCaskill, Will Jones, Rufus Borum, and Justin Campbell. Airport Advisory Board members, Judd Newful, John Browning Jr., Wayne McLean, Hugh Ross Jr., Melissa Miller, Ken Johnson, Dana Jones. You're hereby notified that a special call workshop meeting of the Palatka City Commission and Airport Advisory Board has been scheduled for February 25th, 2022 at City Hall located at 201 North 2nd Street, Palatka, Florida, 32177. This meeting is called to commence at 4 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to hold a workshop to discuss private hangar development at the Palatka Municipal Airport. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Tammy McCaskill. Here. Commissioner Will Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Justin Campbell.
Present.
Commissioner Rufus Borum.
Present.
Mayor Terrell Hill.
Here.
Chairman Judd Newfeld. Mr. John P. Browning. Not present. Hugh Rawls. Not present. Melissa Miller. Not present. Ken Johnson.
Here.
And Miss Dana Jones. Thank you, sir.
Forgot Wayne McLean
Wayne McLean, sorry.
and Melissa Miller here as well.
Mayor, when you get at the right opportunity, could I also introduce someone else who's in attendance with the
Yes, sir. Just for the record, we have a quorum. And you can go ahead.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Yul McNair, who, as of Wednesday, I guess, or Tuesday, whatever the 4th is, will be our official new interim airport director. McNair comes to us with my resume in aviation, having gotten a master's of business administration from Emanuel University with I think a major in airport management administration. He also has previously held positions with the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, Jackson, Mississippi Aviation Authority, then been a position, for administrator and deputy director, I believe, that's one or both. Also, he's been in the private consulting world in the arena of airports, airport administration. So we're looking for great things from him, and he'll be starting work as of next week and joining our team. And if you all after the meeting's over, you can take a minute to introduce yourselves and over the next weeks and months. But I think it's going to be John's shoes are going to be hard to fill for sure. Probably going to take 2 or 3 people to do it, but you were in.
From Yule to Yule.
See that, Commissioner?
That's your mic, Sonny.
You know,
Hit the button.
oh, one more thing, Dwayne, he's a Navy veteran.
All right.
That's right.
Thank you for your service.
No, no. But I kept on flying though. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. You know, this is, if you would have asked me 2, 3, 4 years ago, but I'm standing in Palatka, meeting with airport advisory and leadership, I probably would have been like, no. And I would tell you, this is something that I'm excited about. This is an opportunity that you don't necessarily plan for, other than kind of reflecting on your background. As stated, I'm a Gulf War veteran, aviation interests, aviation emphasis as well. Educated, Southern Illinois University, aviation management as well. So, I am an airport guy. I've been around 20+ years. Jacksonville, Milwaukee, Jackson, Central Mississippi. And, my skill set, I think fits ideally with what the community is trying to do with 28J. So all I ask for is your patience, and, this is a brand new chapter, and, we got a lot of work to do. And I think we have a team that, it's a good start for getting things taken to another level. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You to you. We're now open the floor for public comment. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. No action will be taken on topics of discussion. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Since we're doing a workshop, we're going to use kind of an open forum dialogue. It'll be more informal than normal, so that we can make sure we touch on all the points necessary. And if at any time anybody has a question or a comment, just go ahead and chime in. And just be mindful if someone else is speaking. But other than that, I want us to be able to have the dialogue after the presentation so that we can kind of move forward and at least give some clear direction to staff as we continue on. And so we'll move into the presentation at this time regarding private hangars.
I think most of you know who I am, Matt Singletary, Pastor Associates. Thanks for having me here tonight to help out with the workshop. Andrew wished he could be here, but unfortunately he's out of town. So I did speak with him to get his input last week before he left to go out of town, and tried to incorporate that into this presentation. So I'll try not to take too long and just kind of run through this presentation, which is kind of a new version of a presentation that we have gone through with the city and airport advisory board in previous months. As far as private hangar land leases, I know the airport, excuse me, airport group is familiar with what that is. I don't know if everyone on the city commission, I don't know if I need to explain what that is, but just to quickly, most of the buildings at the airport are owned by the city and rented, and that's kind of the standard for most buildings at an airport. But you can also have buildings which are owned by a private individual where just the ground is leased. And that's what we're talking about here is that scenario. So anyhow, the kind of items I'm going to cover here, a recap on some of the discussion we've had in these previous months about private hangar development concepts. And then if moving forward, what are some of the items the city would need to address? I'm not sure how much of that we want to get into detail today, but we'll go through some of those. And then in Passero, Andrew and myself's opinion, what the goal or objective primarily of tonight would be. And that's obviously up for you guys to determine, but just to give our opinion. Next slide, please. So just to quickly recap for everybody how we got here today, like chronologically. Dan Valancourt is the individual who we've been referencing, who kind of started the conversation, came to the airport last summer in 2021, expressed his interest in building a hangar, so a private hangar at the airport. And John Ewell then brought that to the airport advisory board, and discussion started at that point. There's questions about whether we should move forward or not from then. And that's kind of when Pastor got more involved to look into some of those questions were being asked, such as the feasibility economically. Also, like, did it fit in with the master plan of the airport? So that's some of the stuff we went through, presented to the Airport Advisory Board initially. And following that, I think it was in September when we gave some of the same information presentation to the Airport Advisory Board. It was agreed after that to bring it to City Commission, which was last November. And then here we are at the workshop. So anyhow, just quickly want to run back through the chronology of that. Next slide, please, Sunny. So this is just a graphic kind of, I think this was included in that first discussion at the Airport Advisory Board last summer. We had, after Dan had approached the airport, we identified some locations where a private hangar would make sense to build. And that's what the 1, 2, 3, 4 you see here. After we looked at this, the recommended of the 4 were number 2 or 4. And then the preferred out of those 2 ended up being number 2. So that's over there on the east side near Moody Road. And that's where we kind of dug into the details of looking at a concept further. Next slide, Sunny, please. So this isn't the first concept we came up with over there near Moody Road, but it kind of shows if you were to develop this area, what is the overall build out of hangars you could have. It was part of one of the questions from the city and Airport Advisory Board too was, we don't want to just see where we can put one hangar, but let's look at a planned approach and look at what we can do in a more of a master plan approach. So if we went to this area that was preferred and you build it out as far as you could go there up to the west side, the taxiway C, you get 14 hangars. And that's based on the lease area that we kind of developed. That was part of the kind of planning it, come up with a standard lease area we could offer to every tenant with a standard hangar size that could fit within that lease. And then I guess just another comment here. So this isn't the first layout we looked at. The first layout would be just the hangars on the east side. We kind of looked at what could you build without getting into that forest tree line you see there that extends up into the middle of that layout. Because once you do, the site development costs would go up significantly. You'd be clearing the land. There's a fence line, a ditch that would have to move. There's also wetlands in those woods. So anyhow, next slide, please. So this is when we first looked at it to see what we could fit without going to the woods. This is the concept we came up with, trying to incorporate all the kind of normal standards as far as setback from the runway. The FAA requires a standard taxiway. We came up with a lease area based on a hangar size that we thought would fit any kind of most large corporate jets. 100 by 100 hangars, what we're showing here. So that's what the lease areas are based on, with a 75 by 100 foot aircraft apron space in front of that. So based on that, that's what you get, 5 hangar spaces that could fit here, lease areas. The other things are just kind of identifying what would need to be built. So you got the taxi lane would need to be built. You've got an access road on the south side, which would allow you to have that connection for access back to Moody Road. There is a connection to Moody Road with a gate that's already there right now. So that was another one of the benefits of this location. Then also you've got utilities that is another benefit of this location. They run just on the east side of the 27 end there. So you could have connections for water and sanitary sewer right there. So that's what this layout is. And that's kind of where we stand right now, is what we'll call phase 1 of if you were to build out private hangars in this area, what it could look like. Next slide, please, Sonny. This is the same layout, but the purpose of this graphic was, there's an idea that we had discussed about what is the common infrastructure for this development, what would it be, and the potential for that cost to be covered by the tenants or a portion of it, and shared amongst, if you had a group of tenants ready to move in right off the bat, that could be a shared cost. So the yellow highlighted areas, those are items that would fall under that category. such as the taxiway, the access road on the south, utility connections, any stormwater drainage improvements that you would need to support the area. But that's one of the items that would need to be addressed, as I'll talk about in a minute. But next slide, please. This one, this is another slide that Andrew kind of had wanted to look at, but the intent was just to show if you came in and built one hangar, what is the infrastructure you would need? I mean, honestly, that whole taxiway isn't needed for one building, but and that's kind of, we didn't start with that idea in mind. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The taxiway that ties into the threshold, right at 2.7, obviously the display threshold, you need that. You have to build it where it ties back in to 2.7
On the left side.
on the left side.
That's kind of what I'm commenting on right here. That's not, you know,
Yeah.
to have access to the runway, you know, you only need one connection. Like I said, I guess this is more of an ideal, like if you were able to build the whole taxiway section, that would, you know, quality wise, obviously that'd be better than building a bunch of little single sections one at a time. But anyhow, there's not really, don't really need to add anything else on this. But did you have something?
Well, I mean, I don't mind building the whole road, the length of it, just tie back in.
Oh, you mean even for if all 5 were built out?
Yeah, just basically that tie-in spot I've heard of this. It's like $5 or $6.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's all up for discussion.
Yeah.
Mhm. Understood. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was kind of all the different concept drawings and everything we talked about. And then as far as items that, you know, if you're moving forward, the city would need to address, we kind of went through some of this in our previous discussions, but financially speaking, these are some of the items. I was talking about that common lease area that we had conceptually laid out, being that number you see there is 37,200 square feet. That could be adjusted, but that would be part of the calculation for how much revenue the city's making. It would be that plus the agreed upon lease rate. So it would be a cost per square foot per year. That comparison we're showing on that slide, you know, 3 different numbers where we started at the discussion was the 31 cents per square foot per year, which based on some research that Passero had done, that was a fair rate, but somewhat favorable to the city. And the numbers you see there dollar wise are based on one hangar. If you had for the annual 11,000 and change, and then if you had all 5, that would be 57,000. And then as you go down there, those are the same figures for one hangar, and with 5 annually for 40 cents or 50 cents. And Andrew's recommendation, Pastor's recommendation would be somewhere between the 31 and 40 cents per square foot per year. But that is obviously up for the city in negotiation with tenants. The lease periods, another part that factors into it. A standard lease period could be a 20-year with options for 2 5-year extensions, so a total of 30 years if both parties would like to do that. 35 to 40 years is another lease term that could be implemented and has been in some places, I believe. And especially if you've got those infrastructure costs we were talking about, if the tenants are paying for that, you know, it would make sense to give them a longer lease.
So, can we talk about these?
Sure.
All I know is what I read on the internet, which is scary. But it just seems to me, wouldn't it be more beneficial for a longer term? Wouldn't it be more beneficial for a longer term lease if a business is going to invest? I think you're going to find that your square foot prices are going to rise. But wouldn't it be more beneficial to business concern into the city if the lease was a longer term lease?
I think it would be more beneficial to this is my opinion, I think, to the tenant. I'm not sure where all the city, you know, the tenant, if they're investing, that was kind of the point I was trying to make there at the bottom.
Okay.
If they're investing
So
a good amount of capital, you know, they're going to want to own that capital for longer.
That's my point. I mean, I think this is a great idea for our airport. This is going to push us to the next level. But my point is to get, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest in these hangars. But my point is, for a business, if we want this to be something that we are going to hold out there, I think a normal business person, in my opinion, is going to want a longer term lease if they're going to put that much money investment into it. Especially if it's a younger person that sees that. I mean, it could be a generational thing that they handed down to the next generation. That's just my 2 cents, but I'm not the expert.
Yeah, that standard 20-year, I know that's what Andrew said. You know, I'm not personally sure if
I
that's
got you.
common everywhere.
What is it in Fernandina? It's not 20 in Fernandina. It's longer term, isn't it?
The standard. Okay, with extensions, okay.
I just would ask the commissioners, that's something we should think about as we go down the road with this. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and if, I mean, anyone can stop me at any point if you want to comment, but that's all I've got on this slide. If you want to go to the next, Sonny. This is just back to the same thing we were talking about on that, that graphic there at the bottom when we had it blown up. It's another thing the city would need to agree on with the tenants, this idea of the infrastructure being the cost of that outside of the lease area being paid by the tenants. There's just a list kind of here of all the, you'd have to communicate and agree on that with the tenants, what the responsibilities are. And then that there is just kind of under that a list of the different infrastructure items I kind of talked about earlier. Taxiway, lighting and signage that goes with that, access road, gate upgrades, utilities, stormwater drainage. Next slide, please. Another thing, we had included this the last time we talked about this at the city commission meeting, architectural design standards. That's another something that we would want to have in place so that make sure we're covered with what the city wants to be built. You've got minimum standards architecturally and like land development wise, kind of like land development code type standards. Andrew Pastor's recommendation would be to set a fair yet high standard, not micromanage the lessees with too many details or overwhelmingly excessively high standards or details. Next slide. And then another one, and I just say we had a sample that was handed out from one of the other general aviation airports on the standards. That was Fernandina Beach. And then another item, the specific lease terms, covenants, the lease agreement. There's a couple of samples we had there, Fernandina and one from St. Augustine. The recommendation that Andrew Pastor had on that, between those two, I think the Fernandina was much longer. It had maybe some attachments and stuff to it, but just to keep it concise as possible, direct would be better. And yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed. I added this in. I think this is a slide we went through with the airport advisory board in that September meeting when we first went through this whole topic. But pros and cons of private hangars for the benefit of the city commission who hadn't seen this before. Typically it's always seen as a plus the more activity you have at the airport. So, that kind of correlates to other revenue increases and things like that. Fuel sales, that's kind of a big one. It's been pointed out that you'd be looking for your jet aircraft are really going to have the significant fuel sales, but any aircraft are going to be some amount. Increased business activity on the airport, direct revenue from the land lease and these other items we're mentioning. I don't know if this was ever answered. There's a question about ad valorem tax, and I think there were some comments made on it on the building. That could be an additional revenue. Like I said, I'm not sure what the answer to that was. And then finally, when you have the private hangar versus a hangar that is owned and constructed by the city's not paying for that upfront cost of the hangar construction. So then the cons on the opposite side, I'm not sure how much of a con, some of these are, but private use of public airport land, you do have, instead of the city owning the building, it'd be privately owned. And then right along with that, you'd have some level potentially of competition with the city-owned hangars that the city is renting out. As far as the architectural standards we talked about, you have some risk there if you don't put in place architectural and development standards that you want to have, then you have some risk of not maintaining consistency. But that could be overcome. And then along with corollary, I guess, to not paying for the hangar on the pro, the con is you don't collect revenue or rent on the hangar. You only get the ground lease revenue. Next slide,
I
please.
just have one question.
Sure, go ahead.
When you refer to the hangar construction, I really don't know that approximate cost. Is there like an average cost? Is that 300,000? Is it $1 million? Is it somewhere in between? What is that?
I mean, it depends on the size of the hangar.
The size we're looking at.
Yeah, so like 100 by 100, I would say that's closer to the $1 million than 300,000.
You can do them for cheaper, you know, it just depends on kind of how, you either do a bare bones, nothing special, $50 to $60 a square foot, but if you build something that's, got some interior, basically, when you start adding interior spaces and plumbing, you just want a metal building with insulation in it, that has no, just got electricity, no water, nothing, $50, $60 a square foot.
I'm just trying to kind of get a picture in my head of what the client has in there, because we keep talking about what the city has and what the client has, and so I just kind of wanted to know if there was some average cost, but it sounds like it can be low or high.
Yeah, and the minimum size of the building was gonna matter too. What? Obviously, you don't, in order to put an airplane in a building, you have to have a relatively big building.
Big building. Yeah.
So, you know, it's never gonna be that small.
The 100 by 100 is going to be
Yeah.
pretty relatively expensive.
That's huge.
That's why I was saying just an average, was that $1 million? Is that-
I think you're looking closer to $1 million once you get site costs and anything else.
So what is that scale? You have 14 hangars up there. So what is the size of those buildings? Yeah.
So that concept, that's what it's showing is 100 by 100 hangar. Basically, we were just trying to come up with a standard lease area footprint that could accommodate as big of a hangar as most people would want, or have a jet, a large corporate jet. Any of them that use the airport in Palatka would fit in a 100 by 100 hangar. So that was kind of the idea. So that's kind of the big end of it. But as far as like those architectural standards, that minimums, that would be one thing that the city would have to put into place. What is the minimum size that, you know, you want to allow? But yeah, then the cost would fluctuate based on that.
Well, yeah, but you're talking, your lease footprint stays the same no matter what. So the price to the cost, the money to the city is the same, but your lease footprint of land is the same.
That was the intent of the concept, was to lay out leases that had a set standard area that could accommodate up to that 100 by 100. You know, the building could be smaller, and like I just said, the city would have to say what that minimum size is. But yes, that was the idea, to keep the lease area the same, so that revenue from the ground lease would stay the same no matter what size the building.
Yeah. I was just trying to.
Yeah.
Another question. Are we talking about exclusive rights? Once we talk about identifying buyers or builders, we're talking about exclusive rights, or have we even thought about the option of city building or reserving space so that we may have an option of having those same nice hangars and maybe have the opportunity to lead to someone maybe coming to the game late and want to purchase, or we just want to strictly lease because we want to make some money. Have we thought about that at all?
I don't know if I understood you. Are you saying whether we build those hangars and then lease them out? We want, the ROI on that has always been no. You know, that not only do we not have the money to do that as a city, but we also couldn't get a return to make it worthwhile. So, and again, that could be looked at differently, but that's always been our historic answer to that.
Yeah, but we're going away from historic right now. We're going forward thinking, and I'm asking, have we even thought about that concept? Because we want a win-win for the city. I don't know. I don't know a lot about it, but as we're talking about it.
I mean, that's what we did, is we thought about that concept, and that was our answer. And I don't know if there's some new light on that, but
I had something. A couple of times we've done the math, and we've had people come in that have offered to build row of T hangers. They'll take one and then they'll rent the other 9 out to help pay the financing to build the building. And it just doesn't work. It winds up being, they have to rent somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200. I guess a simple T hanger for a small airplane in the neighborhood of about $1,200 per month to make that mortgage payment at the end of the year. So private people building T hangers didn't work out. So if the city were to build a big hanger, I don't know the economics.
So I would add, just, this is what I have heard in past. The T hangers, that's exactly what I've heard. There's no real ROI as far as the cost to build versus what you get back to rent. But these hangars that are bulk hangers, which could fit a jet, you can rent those for a lot more money. So is my understanding. I don't know where the break even point is or anything like that, but that you could make money on those. However, I think the obstacle is the upfront cost of building it. I mean, like we were saying, what is that initial cost? Well, I don't have an answer for you exactly, but the city would have to come up with that or have a loan or something to pay for that right off the bat.
Couldn't it be a combination of both, though, Commissioner?
And that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, when as we're doing now, I think we should look into that at least so that we can have an answer to that. See how it looks. That's just.
So over the years, and John knows at the airport, we have built some T hanger units, and then on the end of some of those T hangers, we haven't built standalone hangars like what we're talking about here, but on the end of some of those T hangers, we have those types of rectangular square units that can fit larger planes. So that's what we've tried to do over the years, and we have a ability through like FDOT funding to fund the construction of either one of those. We've done it, and you could continue to do that as we move forward using grant funds. But I guess what I was talking about is if you were to fund it yourself, then you're talking about a big cost right off the bat.
Right. But of course, we'll look for alternative funding.
Yeah.
I just want to know if it's a possibility, and I think we should at least.
Yes, I mean, there's no reason that in that row, it doesn't have to be all privately owned.
Exactly.
You can do whatever you want, as far as I'm concerned.
So what you're saying is if Valencourt put one in and Mr. Morris put one in and then we wanted to put one in, that's what you're saying? Yes. And so again, you know, the money that everything that's happened there has all been free money to us, basically. And, you know, that makes it affordable. But if we had to go borrow that $1 million, you know, the ROI is really hard.
Right. But if we could get one of those opportunity grants, you know,
Yeah.
and do that, we just want, if we fill it out with all privately owned, we won't have an option. I'm just saying, think about that, you know, for the future. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Put it out there. I don't know I know your first name is Yule. I don't know the last name.
McMahon.
Mr. McMahon. What do you your experience?
I've always supported having some degree of a mix. And in this case, based upon what I've seen, you know, it's not really a problem. If you got interested parties, when they come in and spend their dollars, all you have to do is give them the box.
Right.
You know, the ground rentals are fine. That's revenue stream. But also, you know, the field purchases and those kind of things, you know, that's when I look at it, you know, they're coming in doing their facility. I'm going to get revenue generated from them. Ground, fuel, sales, you know, those kind of things. You know, having the ability to say, okay, well, hey, one day the city got some free money and doing your own facility and then running the numbers to come up with a facility rate, you can still do that. You know, you could still do that at other locations on the airport. It doesn't seem like with the concepts, you know, purely based on the concepts I've seen, whether it's 14 or whether it's 5, it doesn't seem like there is an exclusive right for each block.
Right.
You know, now you have your leasehold area for your rectangle. But, you know, there's no exclusivity, you know, so if the city have the dollars and want to do 2 blocks, so be it, you know. That has nothing to do with the tenant that's already in place.
Right. I get that.
Yep.
Have the FDOT build 2 hangar projects for us. One was ready to start, and we built one other road that was funded by the FDOT at 100% 8 years ago. So the FDOT is not necessarily standing by a building one every year for you, which it's been about once every 6-7 years.
You guys have an opportunity to get private money, and not just me, we have Charlie and a couple other guys. That costs about $500,000 to just build the taxiway and do the ground. And they're actually taking a pretty good risk. I'm not even sure exactly what I'm gonna get into underground. The electricity, the electrical, the lighting, tying the lighting in. There's a lot of standards I'm not an expert on, the FAA, I mean, these guys are, but, I mean, I've never priced it. I can price a road for you all day long. But, so we're gonna take a huge risk and a huge capital drop just to get the infrastructure in. And then when we build our stuff, obviously the building is expensive, but once it's there, going to the FAA to get grants, taking the tickets another rest of the way, I imagine that's gotta be a whole lot easier than starting from just a big blank slate.
Sure. So I guess that's what I was asking. If there's an opportunity, things to go in there to our home, look similar or what have you, or maybe a high-end individual that wants the same thing. We can actually.
Well, that's just a standard that we set. At the end of the day, we're setting the rules. And so as we set the rules, if that's an option that needs to be explored for future endeavors, then you just make it become a part of your policy.
And correct me if I'm wrong too, there's this is one piece of it. That airport got, John, I mean, gosh, how many acres of land available at the airport are there really? I mean, you guys can build a really be great for the city. You get some money, build like a 200 by 200 acre. Then just bulk it and charge people, and you charge the same rate as your T hangar, you build one big building and you can stuff 30, 40 airplanes in there and go to town.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, sure, no problem. Yeah, I'll move on to the next slide.
Can we go back to one of the pros and cons? So I know not up there, but from what I've read, one of the cons, Mayor specifically, you were talking about standards, that some of the cities in retrospect wish that they'd had a higher standard in terms of architectural design, that they went in cheap and they should have made the standards higher and came back and revised it later on. And the point is, like in Albany, Georgia, they wanted the look to be completely the same, so it looked right. And they didn't start out that way, so that was a negative.
So one of the things I saw over in Fernandina and reading their policy on ground leases, and just for the record, they've got not more than 20 years, but it can be extended for additional periods based upon approval. So their basic ground lease is 20 years. And they do review periods, the first at 7, 14, and 19. Within all those periods, the thing they do to ensure that quality continues on is they have inspection periods at each one of those points. And if it's deemed based on the inspection of the city, then the owner would be liable for 115% of whatever costs are there to perform the duties, to perform any repairs. So within their ground lease, there's authorization for the airport itself to do repairs to the hangar to make sure that it complies with the standards. And so that's another consideration that's there as well. And I think that goes back to where you are as far as quality is concerned.
Right.
And I think the key is to aim high. If you're gonna do it right from the beginning.
Set that standard high.
I mean, Valancourt has a lot of money, so it doesn't really matter. He moves dirt for a living.
Valancourt also lives at an airport community.
You won't be with us. Let's stop that. Don't even get into that conversation. You're wasting your breath. I think the beauty of it is this. It creates the opportunity, I think, to set a standard differently than we've had before, and to set a culture. And I think at the end of the day, anybody that's willing to make that investment wants something that's they want to make sure the standard is high. So when they make their investment, they know they're not going to lose their money.
Right.
And I think that's the key. And again, you don't want it to be overwhelming, but you want it to be of high standard. And I think that's the critical piece of all of it. And we just need to make sure consciously that that's where we are. I think the other question becomes, and it's something that we haven't talked about yet, and it's a real question, you know, it's the 100 low lead versus Jet A. And, you know, is there a classification of planes of aircrafts that we want at the facility, or is it going to be open for all classifications and it's just going to be based upon what the investment is? And so, because there's a distinct difference in revenues from a jet versus certain smaller aircraft. But then there are some circumstances where you may have greater frequency in use and some of the other things that go along with that, which may balance out. And so I think all of it, we have to make sure that we have those conversations to determine how we set that standard and what our expectations from there, because the residual income is the key to the entire equation. Any thoughts on that before Matt continues?
Put something out there, and I don't mind that. It appears from hangars that are leased to, whether owned by, whether the hangar is owned by or leased by private individual on a municipal airport for non-commercial purposes are not subject to ad valorem taxation to the municipality. If it's for commercial purposes, they, according to the AG's opinion, would be. Now, on the other hand, if the hangar is owned by the individual, it may very well be subject to intangible tax, which is a whole different ballgame, obviously. So it could be subject to intangible tax on the part of the, of the owner. Okay, so it wouldn't be the land, it would be the hangar.
So the commercial use creates the non-public. So the non-public use.
So it's owned by a private individual. The hangar is, the land's not. So the land might still not be taxable, but
The actual
physical structure
right, the structure will
owned by a separate individual. Non-government entity might be subject to intangible tax.
no different than the thought process that we had before with the golf course. And
Just want to put it out there, since that topic is brought up, and I didn't want to discuss.
That's all I had on the slide. I'll wrap up the presentation here. So this is just Andrew and I's opinion as far as, you know, what we thought, at least at a minimum, we wanted to get resolved here was an answer, yes or no. You know, do we want to move forward? Certainly, if there's other details that you guys work out tonight, that's obviously great. But if you said if it's yes, we're going to move forward, then you know the city can assign whatever actions need to be taken to work out the details from this point forward. Pastor's recommendation, Andrew's recommendation is yes, proceed. Benefits greatly outweigh any negative factors, and the city has been investing and waiting for years for this type of opportunity to develop. So that was kind of the summary of his recommendation. That's all I have on the presentation.
Just know I asked a good question earlier this week, and that was what the FDOT, does the FDOT have any written guidance on this? Whether it's checking and no written guidance, but there is an understanding that they look favorably upon land lease, private land leases at all airports in Florida.
yeah, I think one of the other things that we just need to be conscious of is as we determine the actual site that we're going to select, that we consider opportunities for expansion in various areas and what those uses would be. There's been a lot of conversation about creating an industrial airport, which has some industrial hangar connectivity in the areas near the factories. And so I think all of those things, we want to make sure on the K. Larkin side that we still have land allocated for additional expansion and even the opportunity for future distribution. If we're able to land a company that brings a volume of jobs in and they find themselves, when we get an expansion of our runway, to be in a position where, we can bring in a company that's going to bring a large number of jobs and more air traffic. So I think, as we balance everything out, let's make sure we're conscious of future opportunities and that we don't lock ourselves out of anything in haste. And so that's the only conversation that I think is critical. And so I know everyone here is going to have those thoughts before, and that's a big piece to the puzzle as well. So Pastor, you got any thoughts? I hear you. I hear your wheels running. We'll go around the table. That's scary. Ms. Jones.
We've been talking about it for months. I think we've all been very favorable toward the concept. I did wonder if, I think there's like a nursing home situation where there's some annual payment in lieu of taxes. Is that something that we could look at so the city does have the ability to get some of the property tax value added? But I mean, I think that's really all I have. That's the questions for us.
Okay. Mr. McLean.
I've made my statements, very much in favor of us moving forward.
As am I.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair.
I'm very much in favor too, and I feel like we've waited a long time for this time so that we could grow to another level. And we talked so many years about how to do it and never have had any money to do it because without private money, we can't. And so I think, and I do think your point is very, very valid, and we've talked about that for years, is out to the west by the industrial park. There's lots of room for expansion over by the water management district too. It could be accessed relatively, I shouldn't say relatively easy, but could be accessed.
If we get the birds away from there.
Yeah. So, I think we've waited, and I do think that we need to, and I wish Mr. Valencourt wasn't here when I said this, because this is not meant to really influence in front of him, but I do think we ought to honor the one that takes the ability to get us to step one. So in other words, we've all wanted this forever. And, if it was him or somebody else, if they're willing to help us take that step, I think there ought to be consideration and appreciation for that personally. Because as a businessman, you enter a new phase of business rarely on your own. You enter with some help of somebody. At least that's my experience and what I see. And so when you do that, there should be a respect and appreciation for that goes beyond getting the most out of the deal. But, I know it's all good for our community. It's all good for our city. It's all good for the future. There's lots of room, and we need to grow when we need to go. And we can't do it by waiting forever, So, and I do think when the first one comes in, I think we'll see more. I think we'll have some people that want to. And I also think that we can change our standards. Now, we can't start out cheap. We have to have a good quality, but we can always modify too as we go forward and see the needs change or arise or grow.
Just let him build in the wetlands. He knows how to handle that part of
That's
it.
good too. Yeah.
Madam CEO.
I'm very much in favor of this concept, but I'm also in favor of the city maintaining standards and for years to come. My biggest concern is fairness to the city and things of the city. And in terms of, you know, the change in economic times, you know, I'm not familiar with what, how rents escalate when they're privately developed, so that's a question I have. I'm not sure I agree with Passero's recommendation that the lease be, you know, short, simple, and sweet. Sometimes I like things to be spelled out and, you know.
Lawyers.
let no detail go around. I need that, right? So, you know, let's answer the questions up front and make sure. I like your concept of evaluations at certain, you know, points in time, making sure that they're maintained properly. I think that's critically important. And also in fairness to the developer, you know, how do the common areas get developed? You know, is there an application process? We see if we are fully subscribed so that everybody shares those expenses, or, you know, how's Mr. Valancourt going to be repaid if he, you know, takes on that initial, you know, expense? So, you know, those are questions, but I think it'll be fascinating. I do think there'll be great interest, and I'd love this to see the city move forward with this.
Sure. Got you.
Let's go. All for it, and we've got lots of land out there. I think we have to try it. It's what we waited for a long time. And I made a few landings. I'm thinking about the business people and pilots that come in and land from the, you know, from the east to the west, looking over here to the left and seeing these nice hangars. And, you know, I can see these business people saying, hey, while we're in town looking at our thing, why don't you check into, you know, what it takes to build a hangar here? While we're in here,
Or relocate your business here.
while we're checking out our marijuana, why don't you check into what it would take to build a hangar out here? No, it's nice. You do look around. And you land up here. Wow, there's something going on. I do think so. Black Bill is an influence of people that will land.
We've heard from you. We'll hear from you.
I tell you, I think great problem to have. You know, not all airports are approached by a local company, you know, home company, to spend their dollars into a facility. These facilities are going to, again, they'd be around 20, 30, 40 years, you know, it's good maintenance, but, you know, this really says a lot of personality of Putnam County. You know, and you got me saying, I'm all for it. You know, again, essentially, this is just a ground lease. You know, we just got to put the plugs to it, but from a city standpoint, you know, not that complicated, I would like to say. And this is a great opportunity to add yet another element to the operation.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Browning missed the entire presentation, but he's here right now. Can't-
Oh, don't blame it on me.
If you can't get here on time, get here when you can. No, you're fine. We were going around the table, Mr. Browning, to have a conversation about everyone's thought processes and where we are in this. And so you got through the first round of the advisory board, given its opinions. We're going to continue on. If you want to kind of tell us what your thought process is, we'll let you scan over the presentation and kind of gather your thoughts and give you the cliff notes. Yes, sir. Mr. Holmes, we're going to continue around, and whenever Matt, if you want to give him a kind of a quick summary over there on the side, then what we'll do is, as we're going around. Yeah.
I guess I'll be the lone person who has mixed feelings about this. I think my feelings haven't changed since I first expressed them. I think a lot depends upon the restrictions that are placed on the use of the hangar. If it's just going to be something that
is owned by an individual on city property and doesn't house a larger aircraft that's going to buy fuel from the aircraft and have aviation activity centered around it. If it turns into something with a small airplane in it and a motorhome and a boat, that somebody's paying $11,000 a year to lease on city property, then I think it has negligible positive impact, and it's taken up a space that somewhere down the road might have been used by somebody who was going to put in a 400-foot hangar. On the other hand, if these hangars are used to house corporate jets, larger twins, things that burn fuel that's bought at our airport, that are used in aviation activities that centers at our airport, then, that's a different matter altogether. So those are my thoughts, and I realize they don't necessarily ring consistent with everybody else who seems to be all in favor of it. But when we start, assuming we do, agreeing upon the restrictions for the airport, for the hangars, that's when things are going to get interesting. So if somebody puts a bunch of money in building a hangar, and then you tell them, but by the way, you got to have only aircraft in here. And by the way, you can't sublet it, because if you can sublet it, then obviously I can have my Cessna in it, and I can rent 4 spaces for 4 other people with Cessnas, and I pay enough. In the end result, I get a pretty good return on my money. So when you start that process of coming up with the restrictions, that's where I think the tale's going to be told. If we keep restrictions in place so that the aircraft that are in there truly generate aviation activity and generate aviation revenue for the airport and the city, then that's fantastic. Otherwise, you've taken up space that you can't ever get back again. And I've said it a number of times, and whether it's consistent with other people's beliefs or not, you know me well enough to know it's not my major issue in determining whether I say it. Palatka has been plagued by a philosophy of something's better than nothing. Fill up space with something on the riverfront, other places. But something's not better than nothing unless it contributes to a positive long-term plan. In fact, something gets in the way of something better. So that's my only reservation. I'm not saying that this doesn't have a place. I'm just concerned about how it evolves. And that's my only thing. So it's not really a no, not that I get a vote, but it's not really a no. It's just a cautionary word. That's the way I feel.
Well, the devil's in the details. I think the details are critical. And so in some of the contract, what we're seeing is language that says subletting has to be approved by the city. Some of the contracts outright deny subletting. And it's just a matter of what the standards are and what we set. And so it kind of goes from there. Commissioner McCaskill.
I'm in agreement. I'm with it being a gore and looking for the partnership, and appreciate you having an interest in our city and coming here. And as long as we have the opportunity to set the standards and consider all, ideas to set the table tonight, I'm looking forward to it. So.
Mr. Johnny Come Lately Brown. You just check, is the light on the mic?
I think it's like so many things, it's all in the deal. It's all in the deal. And what I see in Tallahassee, so much going on in the state, so much in aviation, so much in these airports. It's amazing to me to go back and look what I thought. And I would echo kind of what Don's saying. An example would be I go into East Palatka and I see Popeyes. I'm glad to have it. Or I see another place on the river and I go like, what did we do? What did we do? Who is responsible for that mistake? I talked to county commissioners. They go, well, it was owned. So I say that we're at a crossroads here with the airport. Do something better than nothing is not good. I think really got to make the deal right. It's a problem. And if you went in most hangars at the airport right now, I guarantee you there's stuff in there that shouldn't. And that's just the nature of how it is at airports. I'm not being critical. It's just the way it is. They always bring, they're working on a plane, they bring something else. They got to have an easy go to pull it. So it's a long to say that I'm not against it at all, but I am concerned that we're going to look back. We just need to take a long view. Not one hangar. What are we going to do? If we want to do hangars on one side, that's fine. Make sure that it is good for the city now, and as best we can. Is it going to be good later? I hear, I guess I haven't been here. I apologize to you. But I hear Bass Pro is going to. I hear they're going to have fun. I don't know that anybody has had anything. In fact, I'm pretty confident they have not got anything from Bass Pro saying they're going to be here. Now, if I'm wrong, they can stand up and say it. But I don't want to make a decision unless we know. The guy's going to be in town next week. We should reach out to him if we are and say, are you interested in a hangar? Great idea, because we keep talking about it. But is he really interested? I don't know. Some say he's going to build his own airstrip. But I'm for the airport being longer. As you all know, I have worked hard to try to get interest in it being longer. I wanted to have an instrument approach. I'm wanting customs. Those are things. So we're all after doing better. I don't know what this is, what you want to hear, but I'm concerned that we can tie it up with things that we wish we hadn't. I agree. If we do it, we got to make sure what they're going to put in there. Got to make sure it's big enough hangars that can house. If they leave, they can house a big jet, because I'm convinced we're going to have them. And so I don't know whether that's what you want, but that's kind of a mixed. Yeah, it's your decision. It's kind of like what are we going to do with the airport? Are we going to have it privatized? We're going to have it there. It's a problem. So I apologize. That's kind of a rambling mixture of good and bad. And that is what this is. It's good and bad. It's good we have people want to do it. It's bad that we don't know what's coming, right? So anyway, got any questions of me?
We also want to make sure we give you an introduction of Mr. Yul McNair, be the new airport manager.
Oh, you knew? Oh, great. Well,
His name's Jewel, so you can remember it. They look long enough.
His name's Jewel too?
You know, what rings to mind is I talk to people about our police force, and I say, Johnson, they say, Black Johnson or White Johnson?
And that is a true statement. And they're both detectives. Well, they both were detectives.
Like everybody else must have said it a different way, but anyway.
We'll fill you in on John Browning later.
His wife, for real.
It'll take a long, it'll be your start date.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Boer.
Well, I'm in favor for the idea, concept, but the details that I heard from Don and John. I mean, we want to make sure that we do the right thing at the airport. Again, once you get the hangars in there, they're tied up for a long period of time. We want to make sure that we're not just putting a Burger King or a dollar store or anything out there like that. So
Burger King or a dollar store.
I'm just saying, just on that scale.
Won't be a chili steak either.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm all for the idea and concept as long as it incorporates what Don and John said, and making sure that it's something that the city and the residents would benefit from a tax.
It's gonna be like one of those. We'll make sure it's one of those fancy restaurants you eat at.
Oh, man. That's just my point.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Jones.
I'm on the fence. And I see a little more research. So that's just what I'm on the fence.
Okay, can be on the fence today.
I'm telling you, but.
Is it a picket fence? Is it wrought iron? Is it?
Sound good?
We got our first tie today. Next, Commissioner Campbell. Can't beat it.
Overall, I would for it. I would. The opportunity to see that each. No, the individual company said, no, actually,
You agree with Jones? Let the record reflect.
but.
It's a new one.
that Brandon said, give one around. Mr. Brandon said that is all. That is. But again, I needs to a decision. One sound, one band, one sound.
Is that Southern? Just wanted to make sure that I heard the quote right. Mr. Valancourt, before I go, you can go ahead. You can come up to the mic. Stand up for us.
Wait, what'd you say?
Go ahead.
Oh, you say I'm short? Oh my gosh. Let the record reflect Daniel Valancourt is only 5'6", 5'7". Dating profile said 5'8". It worked. All right. So I appreciate, first of all, it sounds like I got a lot of yeses up here, so I don't want to, I like the yeses.
You don't want to keep talking, huh?
Yeah, I really shouldn't say a whole lot, but just to kind of, I want to kind of summarize it a little bit. This isn't the equivalent of putting a Popeyes on the river. Okay, this is a hangar on an airport. And you really can't go. Is it a hangar or is it not a hangar? It's a hangar. That's what it's going to be. Are there going to be ancillary stuff in the hangar sometimes? Yes, and I don't think that really should matter a whole lot as long as the primary function of that hangar is aircraft and aviation usage. A lot of people will step up in their aircraft. So right now I have an airplane that is not a jet, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to ever have a jet. And you really need that facility before you get the plane. You buy a $5 million jet and leave it parked outside, you're devaluing your plane exponentially. So, I mean, there is a little bit of steps to this, and this is one of them. And I don't know, I'm sitting here, I'm bringing to the table a lot of cash to build something to help with the facility. I'm gonna build a nice building. I'm okay with, if there's some standards, obviously there needs to be some standards. We don't want to have, just a pole barn out there. Not trying to do that. But I'm ready to go. And I appreciate you guys' time. I mean, this is a Friday. Y'all are working hard on a Friday. At 5:30, let the record reflect, it's 5:13.
Hardest working commission in the county.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much.
They got us Thursday, Friday, and Monday.
Yeah. We just got off at
Hey,
11:30
man,
last night.
we earn our 10 cents an hour. So, council, anything concerns before I go? We can't hear you. That's good. Don't worry about it.
For the record, I did not take it.
I was just passing a note to the manager earlier, and it was something that I think you said, Mayor, was I was asking him the size a plane that can fit in 100 by 100 hangar. And I don't think they should be restricted to that size if the runway is going to be extended and people are going to get larger planes. I mean, because then we'll have a bunch of hangars that are non-usable. So I think we should also look towards the future and think about that as if the runway is going to be extended, that the airport is going to grow and prosper, and that we need to have that in mind when we set these standards.
A Gulfstream 4 will fit in 100 by 100.
No.
Yeah,
You
it
said
will
no?
according to the, it will according to the stats.
Yeah.
The longitude that boat house has, that's a really big jet too. And it's got a 65 foot. I don't carry just about everything.
Gulfstream 4, according to its dimensions, has a 77-foot 10-inch wingspan and an 88-foot 4-inch length. So not saying there'd be room to park 3 of them in there, but according to what G4 specific, huh?
It fits, but it's tight.
Once you get in there, you're gonna be able to come out.
See what you started.
We would only hope we'd have that problem.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad problem. So, we've heard everybody. I think the biggest thing is, I think it's an opportunity for us to truly explore, to look at it, to work on the foundations of drafting a document and putting together a schematic. I have concerns with the rates. I think in the research that I've done as it relates to the rates, most of those rates were established many, many moons ago. I know that those rates have become the standard for where we are. But I would like to explore more agreements to see if there are some what the newer standards are at some of the newer airports, to see if they are continuing on with and we've seen ground, and I saw ground rates in my earlier research that went from 20+ cents per square foot to 31 in some cases. And but I want to look at the rates to make sure that it actually makes sense. But the other part is just location. And, for someone who is learning more about aviation, the more we continue to have these conversations, the other thing is, do we need to look at more than one opportunity and look at classifications of planes being at different places, and maybe shrinking the footprint in the location so that you have smaller classifications of planes. So your planes that may run 100 low lead are in one area, maybe closer to where we are now with T hangars. And we've got and the larger planes are in the area that we've identified as a possible location for something different. I think that may create an opportunity for us to do something else as well. But those are all questions that we can explore, I think, long-term. But I'm definitely interested in us moving forward with subsequent meetings and next steps to see what the reality is. I appreciate Mr. Valencourt, along with the other business owners and aircraft owners who've committed resources and time to looking at Palatka as an opportunity and to become partners per se in what we're doing. And but I think we just have to make sure that we look at the caveats and that we truly do our research and our homework to make sure that it does not impede future growth. I think more than anything else, if it's something that's going to impede our ability to change, to move forward long-term, then the answer is no. But if it creates additional opportunities for us to bring in industry, to bring in, notoriety and visibility, then yes. And so, if you've got those things in place, it works. I'd love for us to have the conversation that Valencourt Construction has that same notoriety that we get from Morris a few years from now, because they've become a global piece as it relates to moving Earth. And so we hope that growth continues, and this is just a foundation of where we are. But we have to look at ways in which we can, one, generate revenue, I think, two, keep continuity of what the master plan is, and be able to not impede future opportunities. So that's my thought. The last piece for me is security, and to make sure that we implement processes that will keep us from having any real issues as it relates to contraband, as it relates to any illegal activity, and making sure that as people are moving from quasi-private property onto the airport, that we have certain processes in place to ensure that we are upholding standards of the FAA and, quite honestly, of TSA as well, and Homeland Security. And so that's my thought process in a nutshell. Any other questions? And let's talk next steps, where we go from here. And is there any specific direction that you need us, what you've heard thus far, in order for us to move forward? Yep.
Support you guys. I don't need any further.
So I think the next step for us is to really get in the details of looking at what designs are, maybe at our next meeting, if everyone is in favor of addressing concerns. So Commissioner Jones, you got to do more research. I think we all have to do more research as a whole, but I think the next steps are going to be starting looking at details, where if it sounds like the majority is in favor. And so that allows us to start looking at concepts of what we want from a design standpoint, and maybe giving some examples of where that goes, looking at sample policies and leases to determine what best fits our concern, and then adding what other things we may have that puts us in that position. And so I don't see this being a short-term process. I see this being something that's going to have continual conversation. And so I would say the next step is to set a subsequent meeting which addresses some of those things and puts together concepts, or at least send out communications with examples so that we can start to look at various samples.
Mayor, is the thought that you'd have one design that would be applied to each hangar? In other words, it'd be one design, one both in appearance and otherwise. So we're talking about a consistent design on each of the sites.
But, I think Judd and I talked about, well, at least for the first 5, you would have an architectural standard there. And then as the mayor and a couple other people said, as it moved on, the standards may change. But for the first 5, it should be
Same design.
Yes, same design.
Is it feasible to have some kind of a markup or something of what that design would look like for the next meeting? Well, I don't know that it has to be, I'm not looking for something that, is the actual blueprint, but even conceptual, yeah, of what it would look like.
We had
What Charlie showed something that he said, it's not gonna look like this, for sure. So we don't want that. This is what we think we're gonna get, but we don't get it.
You want what it's not going to look
We
like.
wanna see how it's gonna look like remotely, gotta be close.
The not look like picture didn't look bad.
No, it look real nice. No, we wanna.
One thing, just my discussion with Andrew, not to put anything on you right away. It may make sense to have, you'll now lead some of these. There's several items that we discussed. Architecture standard, lease rate, other items that need to be worked out. But kind of doing some of the digging into these things that seem the airport manager's role may be an appropriate start.
Is it the standard that the lease rate that's initially adopted be one that adjusts on a predetermined rate over time? So if the lease rate is 31 cents a foot, is it the standard that would be adjusted every X years?
Period. No, not
Periodically.
none of the leases I've seen. They set.
Room for like inflation, CPI, that kind of adjustment.
You can, but the ones I've seen thus far haven't done that. They just said
It's been consistent for the whole 20 years.
Yeah, they don't. The ones I've looked at those so far, what they do is at the renewal periods.
I want that deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think everybody does. And so, I mean, it's 31 cents a square foot too. But I think the other piece of it is they change over in the renewal periods. They adjust based on renewal periods.
And one thing our fire chief, I guess, is on the line, texted to the city attorney, is that when we're doing this, we also need to make sure we factored in fire protection. And so we need to get Chris Taylor involved. I don't know if he's talking about just having hydrants at, in the vicinity of the hangars, or if he's talking about something by way of, God forbid, a sprinkler system. So we probably ought to include him in the conversations, I guess. We don't, so nobody gets surprised as we go along that process. Is he on?
Chief?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you'd want to think about aircraft, especially with the larger aircraft, being able to deal with those. So you got airport type firefighting equipment and engines and stuff like that. It's specialized for aircraft especially, and you would need to sprinkle those buildings along with maybe smoke evacuation systems and stuff. That would come from the architect as we move forward, but it's just something to keep in mind.
So maybe we can try to get more details and try to start addressing the, those parts of those components of the pictures, before the next meeting, between now and the next meeting.
And that would include a sample lease maybe?
Sure, I would think so.
And if there's, and I guess the other piece of it is there are costs associated with this planning piece of it. Then we need to make sure we approve those so that we can move forward.
Do you want to talk about that now with?
I think we can set it up and talk about it in the next airport advisory meeting and then advise the commission so that everybody be on the same page and have the information.
So what about subleasing? No subleasing, or I think I might have missed it.
What's the pleasure? I guess the question is, that would be the pleasure of really the commission and the recommendation that comes from the advisory board. In the Fernandina lease, they had a clause that said subleasing would have to be approved. So the subleasing clause there says any assignment must be in writing and require city commission approval, and such approval would permit updating and amending the contract as may be required. Assignments only permitted of ground lease contracts, not permitted of any city-built month-to-month rentals. Subletting, no subletting of more than 75% of the property lease. Permitted of ground lease facilities, personal or commercial with city approval, not permitted for any city-built month-to-month rentals. And that was on the Fernandina leases.
How would we know if there was a sublet?
You'd have to rely upon the airport manager.
Right, okay.
And I might recommend if someone wants to sublet to somebody who's got a jet, elevate the use of that.
No, it just says, I mean, like this one just says it has to be approved by commission.
And it's still approved.
Right.
They build on city property. City property.
That is true.
City property. Construction of building. Are they subject to
Search, that was you about to ask, officer?
no, are they subject to impact fee?
Not in the next few months.
Initial thought would be no, it's city property.
That's another con for the city.
Yeah, that would be something that we'd have to research. our initial inclination is no, but.
You know,
Can we
but
research that,
just
find out?
not to be, just to throw into the mix for consideration though, in a way, if they're contributing to the infrastructure cost of the apron and the taxiway and the other things that they talked about, they're kind of contributing to the impact of the structure.
That's gonna be the first person, but what about those that come up after?
No, my last understanding of the concept was gonna be, you're gonna look at the cost of doing the 5 hangars by way of talking about the taxiway, the infrastructure needs of those first 5 hangars, and they were gonna be somehow portioned among the first 5 hangars. They might be paid by one person up front, but I guess what I'm hearing is that if one person paid a larger portion than 1/5, then as new hangars came on board, that first person would get reimbursement or something of that nature. That's kind of what I gathered from what I was listening to. So in a way, you'd be offsetting, you'd be something akin to an impact fee, but it'd be direct payment, it'd be in kind.
Any other questions before we adjourn?
Right to the next meeting.
Let's bring it up at the next airport advisory board meeting. And then let's bring it up to the next airport advisory board meeting.
Well, that's not, you're not talking about the one next week, you're talking about April.
No, the next April. I think it gives enough time for everybody to kind of address their concerns. And then
We might as well have a special call meeting on Tuesday.
and so and then if necessary, we'll push forward with an additional meeting with the commission based upon the recommendations that come forward. Does that make sense? Everybody's on board with that? Happy Friday. Anything else? If there's nothing else, we're done.